Back when it released in 2018 on consoles and in 2019 on PC, Red Dead Redemption 2 was widely regarded as one of the most visually stunning games in recent years. And in my opinion, even to this day, the game's visual still holds up, and technically it surpassed even most new releases of 2023. Now, I covered this game 2 years ago, and back then my video was targeting specifically the GTX 1050 Ti. That's why I decided to revisit this game with more powerful hardware and with its current and most polished build, to see how each setting scales in terms of visuals and performance. And the game has a lot of settings to test, so let's not waste any more time and let's get going. Now in this video, I'll try to take a different approach compared to what I usually do, and instead of randomly exploring settings, I will categorize them based on the specific visual aspects they affect. For instance, there are numerous settings that impact reflections, and there are other settings that affect shadows, and so on. But first, let's kick off with image quality. Initially, when the game was released, it did not have support for DLSS or FSR, but these technologies were later introduced through a patch, and since then the game still utilizes an old version of DLSS 2.2.10, which exhibits noticeable shimmering during motion compared to the later version 3.1.11. However, even with the latest version, we can see that DLSS still has some stability and clarity problems compared to FSR. So here something is wrong with DLSS and the game's engine, and overall FSR looks better in my opinion. For anti-aliasing, the game offers a lot of options. First, we have FXAA, which is a cheap option, and quality-wise it does not offer a lot to eliminate aliasing. But what's not cheap in terms of performance is MSAA. Here at 1440p, going from off to X2 costs 24%, to X4 42%, and to X8 61%. And finally, of course, we have TAA, and this one has a negligible performance impact. Now let's take a look at the graphic settings, starting with textures and geometry. First in this group of settings we have texture quality, and unfortunately in this game only ultra textures look decent, and lesser options drastically affect the image quality. And here you can see the difference in VRAM usage between each option at native 1440p. The next setting in this group is Anisotropic Filtering, and usually this setting doesn't have a big impact on performance. And it's the same story here, because going from 2x to even 16x costs around 2%. So here I recommend 16x. Next we have Geometric Level of Detail. This slider controls the level of detail and complexity for objects at various distances, as you can see here with this building. And because of this, using a low value can cause some LOD pop-in, as you can see here with 1 out of 5 compared to 3 or 5 out of 5. And performance wise, when GPU bound, there is negligible cost when going from 1 out of 5 to even 5 out of 5. But when CPU bound, that difference increased to around 5%. So here I recommend 3 out of 5, especially if you have a weaker CPU. And next we have Tesselation. This one mainly affects the complexity of tracks and footprints that characters can leave in the snow or mud like here. And performance wise, going from low to even ultra costs around 3%. So here I recommend leaving this one at ultra. And the last setting in this group is Parallax Occlusion Mapping. This one gives more depth to flat surfaces. For example, like here, it can give break textures in these surfaces the appearance of being individual 3D blocks when using medium or higher options. And performance wise, going from low to medium and high costs around 3%, and to ultra 7% without any visual benefits. So here I recommend medium or high. Now let's move on to the next group, which includes settings for shadows. First we have shadow quality setting. This one controls the resolution and sharpness of shadows cast near the player. And options from low to high have almost similar performance, and going to ultra costs around 4%. So here I recommend high or ultra shadows. Next we have far shadow quality. This one controls the quality of shadows cast by far trees and objects like here. And performance wise, going from low to even ultra costs only 2%. So here I recommend ultra. Soft shadow stitching, when enabled, make shadows look soft the further they are rendered from the object that casts them, as you can see here. And performance wise, this stitching has almost no impact, so this one is purely down to personal preference. Some may prefer sharp shadows all the time, even though they are less realistic. If you fall into this category, of course, it is recommended to disable this stitching, otherwise use ultra soft shadows. Grass shadows control screen space shadows for small grass and foliage, as you can see here between low and high. And performance wise, this setting seems to have negligible impact, so keep it at ultra. Next we have long shadows. This one affects the length of shadows cast by objects and characters during sunrise and sunset. And when enabled, it increases the extent to which shadows are projected like here. And it doesn't have a big impact on performance. That's why I recommend keeping this one on. For ambient occlusion, the game relies on screen space ambient occlusion or SSAO, which gives precise shading in areas where objects or surfaces come into contact or are closer to each other like here. And performance wise, going from off to even ultra costs around 5%. So here, since ultra doesn't offer much visually compared to high, I recommend high to stay on the safe side. For resolution, screen space ambient occlusion when enabled should make the engine rendered SSAO at full resolution of the screen, without any downscaling or lower resolution sampling. But visually I can't notice any significant difference when enabling this setting, and performance wise it costs an additional 4%. That's why I recommend keeping this one off. Now let's move on to volumetrics and lighting. First, in this group of settings we have lighting quality, and this is one of the most demanding settings in the game, and it affects dynamic lights from the moon and other emissive sources. And when using higher and ultra, it increases the accuracy of light simulation and light scattering, as you can see here. Performance wise, going from low to medium doesn't cost anything, but going to high costs 18% and to ultra 24%. So here, if you are looking for big boost in performance, I recommend using medium. But if you have enough performance to spare and you want to make the game look better, especially during nighttime, go for high. Next we have global illumination. This one affects the indirect bouncing of light within the game world. Like here, you can see how with ultra this room is filled with a brownish hue as light bounces from the floor and transfers its color to the surrounding, and this setting has negligible performance impact, so here I recommend keeping it at ultra. Near volumetric quality specifically affects volumetrics near to the camera, and performance wise going from low to medium costs 1%, to high around 3% and to ultra 7%, so here I recommend medium. Next we have far volumetric quality, and this one for volumetrics far away from the camera, like here with these clouds. Performance wise going from low to ultra costs around 4%, so here I recommend keeping this one at high or ultra. Volumetric lighting quality when used in higher options eliminates banding and dithering from volumetric lighting, and performance wise going from low to ultra can cost around 2%. So here I recommend ultra. And the last setting for volumetrics is unlock volumetric Raymarched resolution. This setting in theory when enabled should enhance the level of detail and visual fidelity of volumetric clouds, but I can't really see any visual difference between on and off, despite the fact that enabling this setting costs around 6% performance wise, so keep this one off. Let's move on to reflection settings. First let's start with reflection quality. This one affects reflections found on glossy or rough surfaces like some windows or puddles, and this is a demanding setting on the performance and VRAM when using ultra, because going from low to medium costs around 5%, to high 7%, but to ultra 21%. So here I recommend medium reflections to save performance, since these reflections look bad even with ultra. And for these reflections we have an MSAA option, which should apply multi-sample anti-aliasing to elements rendered in these reflections. And here I'm using high reflections because running both ultra reflections and X8 MSAA is impossible on 8GB of VRAM. And going from off to X2 drops performance by 11%, to X4 17% and to X8 24%. So here I recommend keeping this one off. Mirror quality only affects the quality of reflections and mirrors, and from what I've seen this setting doesn't have any performance impact, so I recommend keeping this one at ultra. Now let's move on to another group of setting, this time with trees and foliage. And let's start with grass level of detail. This slider is similar to geometric level of detail but for grass and undergrowth. And performance wise, going from 0 out of 10 to 3 out of 10 costs around 5%, to 6 out of 10 7%, and to 10 out of 10 13%. So here I recommend at least 5 or 6 out of 10 to eliminate most LOD pop-in with minimal impact to performance. Moving on to tree quality, and similar to the previous one, this one controls the LOD but for trees, as you can see here, and performance wise it has negligible impact even in a place full of trees. So here I recommend keeping this one at ultra. And the last setting for this group is tree tessellation, which as the name suggests controls the quality of tessellation for trees, as you can see here, and performance wise enabling this one can cost up to 15%. So here I recommend keeping this one off. Now let's move on to water settings, starting with water refraction quality, which as the name implies affect the quality of refractions and bodies of water like here. And performance wise, going from low to medium costs around 2% and to high 7%, so here I recommend medium. Water reflection quality is next. This one mainly affects the accuracy of screen space reflection on water surfaces. Performance wise, going from low to medium costs around 2% and to high 5%, so here again I recommend medium. And the last setting for water, and one of the most demanding one, is water physics quality. This one controls the quality of water simulation effects like ripples and displacement from moving in or around it like here. And performance wise, going from 0 out of 4 to 2 out of 4 doesn't cost anything. However, going to 3 out of 4 costs around 7%, and to 4 out of 4 a massive 33%. Also, it seems like this setting affects the CPU more, because here when CPU bound, going from 0 out of 4 to 3 out of 4 costs 10%, and to 4 out of 4 43%. So here I recommend sticking with 2 out of 4, where you get some water simulation effects without any big impact on performance. Now let's move on to some additional settings that we haven't covered yet. First, we have particle quality. This one should affect the density of particles, but even when restarting the game several times after changing this one, I can't really see any visual or performance difference between low and ultra. And similar thing for particle lighting quality, which also doesn't show any difference between low and ultra. So here I recommend keeping these settings at medium or high, just to stay on the safe side. Decal quality affects how many decals like bullet holes and blood the game can draw and how far they will be rendered like here. And this setting doesn't affect the performance at all, so keep it at ultra. And the last setting is fur quality. This one determines the quality of fur rendering on some animals like here, and performance wise going from medium to high costs around 7%. So here I recommend medium, since during normal gameplay you really won't notice the effect of this setting. Now before we move on to optimized settings comparison with max settings, let's compare the performance of the two APIs used in the game, DX12 and Vulkan. Here we can see that overall Vulkan offers better performance and stability compared to the DX12, but keep in mind that the way the games performs with these APIs can differ depending on what hardware is being used. That's why I recommend trying both APIs on your PC and see which one have better performance. Now based on everything we saw so far, these are my recommended settings. Let's now quickly compare optimized settings and max preset with TAA high on both sides. So MSAA is disabled here, and I choose this part from the in-game benchmark as it provides a more accurate representation of the in-game performance. Here we can see that on average, optimized settings should offer around 90% performance uplift compared to max settings, with minimal impact on the game's visuals. Overall, Red Dead Redemption 2 stands as a testament to the enduring quality of its visuals, which continue to impress long after its initial release. The attention to details, stunning landscapes, and impressive character rendering contributes to an immersive experience, and it's a great example of how a good PC port should be, as the game offers a lot of graphics settings which scale very well in terms of visuals and performance. And when it comes to tweaking these graphical options, water physics, tree tesselation, lighting quality, and reflection quality with MSAA represent the most demanding settings and the source for achieving better performance. And with that, we arrive at the end. Thank you so much for watching and for your time. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If not, leave a dislike. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for any future videos. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.